Hi, gang. Hello, hello. And here is your Wednesday poll question at Smerconish.com. Will we ever know the true impact of the U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear sites? I'm a no vote. I'm a no vote for the simple reason that we really couldn't reach consensus on the intel before the attack on the three nuclear facilities. So I don't see any resolution of this issue. I don't think it'll come easily. More on that in a moment. Thank you to my friends at Parks Casino. You know I'm a music person. As a matter of fact, thinking of Parks Casino and the great summer lineup that they have well into the fall, as a matter of fact, at the Excite Center, which is where all of their headliners perform. In the newsletter today, sadly, you will see an obituary from Variety for Mick Ralphs, who was the guitarist for Bad Company and responsible for so many hits. He wrote or co-wrote Can't Get Enough, Feel Like Making Love, that's for Bad Company, Rock and Roll Queen, and One of the Boys for Mott the Hoople, and Ready for Love, which was recorded by both bands. Later in his career, he co-wrote Flying Hour with George Harrison. Here's the sad part. Sad that he's gone at age 81. But terrible that Bad Company is being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year, and he didn't live to participate in it. They should have been accepted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame years ago. I know I'm dating myself, but Straight Shooter, great album, and I still listen to it from time to time. And I saw Bad Company do a reunion tour, and they came to Philadelphia at the Mann Music Center. That feels like 15 or so years ago. What's upcoming at Parks Casino? Gary Clark Jr., UB40, Australian Pink Floyd doing the 50th anniversary of Wish You Were Here, the Revivalists, Roots Rock and Modern Twist. The tour is called All in the Family 10 Year of Men Amongst Mountains. How intriguing. Classic rockers, Kansas, the Psychedelic Furs with guest Gary Newman. Everclear, Sparkle and Fade 30th Anniversary Tour, Almost Queen, a tribute to Queen. Bill Murray and his Blood Brothers for one night only at Parks Casino, Saturday, November 15. For tickets, go to parkscasino.com. You've got to be 21. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Yesterday, we had 31,781 votes cast on this question. Agree or disagree, Trump was right about Iran. And this was before the intel issue became such a big issue yesterday, initially with CNN's reportage, leading to today's Wednesday poll question. Will we ever know the true impact of the U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear sites? Remember, Trump was hot as he left the White House and dropped the F-bomb yesterday. That was a fun conversation on radio. But he was hot before this blew up. He was already angry at the way in which CNN and other outlets were covering the initiative in Iran. And I'm sure he's even hotter now. We'll play that audio on radio today. But CNN was the first to report the story. And now all the major media outlets are saying the same thing. From the lead, and this is my lead story today in the newsletter, the U.S. military strikes on 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities last weekend did not destroy the core components of the country's nuclear program and likely only set it back by months, according to an early U.S. intel assessment that was described by 7 people briefed on it. This is from the Defense Intelligence Agency. That is the Pentagon's intel arm. It's based on a battle damage assessment conducted by CENTCOM, U.S. Central Command. There will be other assessments. They may come to different conclusions, but what seems indisputable is this is the assessment that was done for the Pentagon that first came out. And I want to say that I don't think that anybody talking about this assessment is, or should be, denigrating the precision of the military. The military did that which was asked. It was flawless. It was amazing. A 35-ish hour mission of B-2s largely taking off from Missouri and completing that mission and coming back, and everybody was safe. 2 of the people familiar with the assessment, back to the CNN coverage, said Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium was not destroyed. One of the people said the centrifuges are largely intact. Therefore, they say, this person added, that they've set back the program maybe a period of months. The White House as I suggested a moment ago, Caroline Levitt was more upset initially about the leak. Quote, this alleged assessment is flat out wrong, was classified as top secret, but was still leaked to CNN by anonymous, low-level losers in the intel community. The leaking of this alleged assessment is a clear attempt to demean President Trump and discredit the brave fighter pilots who conducted a perfectly executed mission. Both things can be right at the same time. They did their job, but it wasn't enough, perhaps, because of how deep the centrifuges were buried. President Trump, for his part, in all caps via Truth Social, the nuclear sites in Iran are completely destroyed. Now, I find some other aspects of this interesting, not the least of which is that there's reporting from Barack Raviv at Axios as to, well, what does Israel think? And by this reporting, Israel is a bit perplexed because they think it was more successful than apparently the U.S. intel does. Quote, Israeli intelligence services believe U.S. and Israeli strikes caused very significant damage to Iran's nuclear facilities, with some officials perplexed by a leaked U.S. intel report that suggested otherwise. And then the Axios report gives some of the background that I've already shared, and reports then as follows. Israel, which initiated the war and faces a far more direct threat from Iran than the U.S., is largely satisfied with the early results from Trump's military strike. They point out in this piece that the DIA report was based on early intel from just one agency, that the overall picture remains muddled, their word choice, a word that I was using last week before the strike took place, especially with Iran itself still assessing the damage and weighing its next move. That's interesting. What does Iran think? So you've got Trump saying, that it was obliterated, Israel believing that Trump is largely correct, the Pentagon intel saying, hey, you know what? It wasn't as successful as we thought. What about the Iranians? Well, we can only rely on what the Israelis say the Iranians believe by way of Axios Barack Raviv. Quote, Israeli officials said the Iranian government has been engaged in its own battle damage assessment to determine the state of its nuclear program. An Israeli official with direct knowledge of the intel on Iran told Axios that intercepted communications suggest Iranian military officials have been giving false situational reports to the country's political leadership, downplaying the extent of the damage. The Iranians themselves still don't have a clear idea of what happened to some of their nuclear facilities. By the way, why can't, I know this is my naivete, but as I look at those images of Fordo in particular, where any number of ordnances, those 30,000-pound bunker busters were dropped, it's surrounded by sand. It was apparently evacuated before the U.S. strike. Why can't we land, a number of SEAL Team 6 units there? Of course, they'd have to be protected against potential nuclear fallout, and let them go take a look. Then we know for sure. Anyway, the poll question today at Smerconish.com asks whether we're ever going to know. And it comes against the backdrop of some interesting polling data just released by CBS on whether there's approval by Americans of Trump's initiative. Remember, when I asked this question, overwhelmingly people at Smerconish.com, thoroughly unscientific, were saying, don't do it. When CBS, with more expertise and having appropriate sample sizes from different demographics, asks the question, U.S. airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facility, do you approve or disapprove? Among Democrats, 87% disapprove. Among Republicans, almost the exact same number, 85% approve. What about independents? Roughly 2/3 disapprove. 64% don't approve, and 36% do. So that's where it stands. President Trump, from his standpoint, quote, fake news CNN, together with the failing New York Times, have teamed up in an attempt to demean one of the most successful military strikes in history. The nuclear sites in Iran are completely destroyed. He's going to regret, I think, that he said that. Both the Times and CNN are getting slammed by the public. That's his take. My question today, will we ever know the true impact? I think we're going to get a decent assessment, but I don't think that there's going to be a crystal clear picture that emerges of how much damage was actually done. And do you know why mostly I say that? Because going into the question of whether we should strike and then whether we should have done what we did, it was never clear. I've gone through this TikTok so many times, but you had Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI, in March disputing the readiness of Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. The Israeli strike happened on a Thursday night. The previous Monday, President Trump was saying, don't do it. The day of the attack, President Trump was saying, don't do it. When the attack by the Israelis took place, Marco Rubio put out the statement wanting to have the United States at arm's length. I don't think any of that was a ruse. I think the United States truly had reluctance to see Israel go forward. But once Israel did it, and given the impressive nature of the way the Mossad launched their attack against Iran, including from drones that they launched within Iran, Trump wakes up. He watches Fox News. Everybody's praising the Israelis. He wants in, changes the pronouns, starts to speak of we. And all of a sudden we were, joined at the hip in this, setting the predicate for Trump then deciding to move forward on his own and launch the strike that the Israelis were eager for him to do. And if you read the reportage yesterday from the Washington Post, it's like this was Netanyahu's dream, to get an American president, particularly this American president, because when he started planning a year ago, he didn't know who'd win the election. And then it all just worked in his favor that Trump was able to do the bidding that Israel wanted him to do, wanted the United States to do, and that was the attack of last Saturday night. So that's where we are up to the minute, as best I know and see it. The poll question today at Smerconish.com, will we ever know the true impact of the U.S. strikes on Iran's nuclear site? A lot of voting already. A fair divide on the question, but please go and cast your ballot, and I'll give you the result tomorrow. Okay? Thank you, gang. Like and subscribe. Set yourself up for notifications if you are a YouTube viewer. I appreciate you and your interest. See ya.